Okay, I don't know if I'm ready for more puzzles and shit. But here we go. Some more of that, 999, son. You know what it is. So, if I just, do this thingy. Like that, just for a sec. So what happened last session? God. Okay, so we went into room 8, didn't we? With Clover and Lotus. Snake went missing. And the previous doors, I think it was 3, 7, and 8, that were all locked because they were missing some certain component. The components had all been restored, and the doors were now active to be opened. Snake went missing, and we then had to split up and try and look for him. So I ended up going with 8 because 7 would have meant I would have gone with 7 again, and I felt we already had some backstory on 7. So I figured let's try and get to know some other people. So I went with Lotus and Clover. Clover was able to share some more background about Snake with us, didn't she? She said that Snake became blind due to a bad car accident that also resulted in one of his arms being amputated. In a replacement, he's got a prosthetic arm now. Well, Lotus, turns out she's some mad computer hacker / programmer, and knows her way around a computer or two. She also threw out this kind of theory, didn't she, about humans and their brains, or rather how everything that kind of goes on in a human being, their senses, their thoughts, that kind of thing, their moods, that is all generated somewhere else that is not the brain. She said she referred to the brain being like a computer monitor. It's not where everything happens, but it's where you see it, you know? So you think thoughts, but the thoughts did not originate in your brain, if that makes sense. So consider it as though if a monitor was damaged on a computer, the computer would still be working just fine, it's just that you can't see what's going on. So say if a person suffered some kind of brain trauma and they were unable to, say, see, speak, you know, or distinguish faces, these are all things that she's brought up. It's not because they're unable to, it's just that their monitor is broken, their brain, so they can't process that they can't see it just too well. It's a bit hard to try and explain. It's more something that's just gonna click in your head once you get it. So yeah, after that we managed to escape out of room 8, where we also met up with the group who went into 7. Oh, Ace also drugged himself to kind of force us to go on without him because we couldn't bring him with us. But once we escaped the rooms, we ended up in the same big large room with all those beds, didn't we? And yeah, there was 3 to still go check, which Ace, Clover, and 7 I think went to go check, or something like that. And me, Lotus, and Santa, and I want to say someone else, probably, I forget, went on to open one of the doors that we got this key for. I forget which door it was, which planet it was. I want to say it was Jupiter, I'm not sure. But that's where we left off. There's not going to be voices per se for the characters anymore, because 1, these sessions take forever and it is mad strenuous on my voice, and 2, I kind of want to start treating the characters with a bit more seriousness. It was a bit of fun kind of messing around with them in the beginning when shit wasn't cracking, but now we're starting to get into more depth with the game's events. So we're going to kind of just tone the whole craziness down a bit, and just take in the game. So Junpei's companions nodded. He nodded back, and slowly and quietly opened the door. So this is exactly where we left off before. Everyone in the chat's like, good! No more fucking voices! Inside was exactly what he expected to see, from the map of the ship's interior. They were in a tremendous hall, almost like a ballroom, with a massive central staircase. Great. Back to the beginning. You sure this is a good idea? What do you mean? Well, we already searched every inch of this room, didn't we? I'm asking you if there's any reason we came back here. Of course there's a reason, silly Santa. Of course there's a reason. And sometimes I can't tell if you're smart or just lucky. Huh? This. Junpei pulled two things out of his pockets. The Saturn key card. And the Earth key. Santa cocked his head to one side, like an inquisitive bird, and looked at them. After several long moments, during which it became apparent that Santa had no idea what the cards meant, June took pity on him. Don't you remember, Santa? On C deck, where we are now, there was a big elevator behind the stairs. Remember? For some reason, sound effects like that always catch me off guard, and I kind of get a little bit nervous. I don't know why, but every time things like that happen, I'm just like, whoa. And next to the elevator, there was a card reader with the Saturn symbol on it. And on A deck, on the door to the left, there was a keyhole with the Earth symbol on it, I think. So the two keys that Jumpy has. Should let us use the elevator and the door on A deck, huh? Yeah, that's right. June smiled, pleased with herself. So did Santa. Alright, I got it. Let's get started then. What do you say we split into two teams? Lotus and I... Oh yeah, I bet you want to be with Lotus, don't you, Santy? Don't you, Santy? Great. Lotus and I will search the Earth one. So you two can search Saturn, alright? Yeah, sounds good. I actually want to spend more time with Lotus. I quite like her character. Junpei handed the Earth key to Santa. They decided that their initial search should be brief, only 10 minutes. They'd meet back near the staircase once they were done. Junpei and June headed for the elevators. Sure enough, there was a card reader bolted to the wall next to the left elevator. He lined up the Saturn key card and swiped it through the door. A light on the upper left corner blinked to life. Great. Looks like it's working now. Alright, now how do I call the elevator? There was a single button to the right of the elevator. On the button was the upside down triangle, the universal symbol for down. There didn't appear to be an up button. Junpei pushed it. He didn't have much of a choice. Okie dokie. It opened. Look, Junpei. June's voice was excited, but Junpei could hear a tinge of anxiety, and I can hear my dog losing it. Sweet, it opened. Hold on, I need to go quiet my dogs down. June's voice was excited, but Junpei could hear a tinge of anxiety. Alright, let's get going. He grinned at June and stepped toward the door. As he was about to set foot in it, he felt a hand on his arm. Wait. What? I'm not... I just... Junpei was at something of a loss. Could she possibly be... What could she possibly be so frightened of? June was probably afraid of... being locked up alone with a boy. That they could only go down. She was afraid because the only elevator button pointed down. That meant, of course, that the elevator couldn't go any higher than the floor they were on. As he thought about it, Junpei realized he hadn't seen elevators on the A or B decks near the central staircase. All of which meant that the elevator could only convey them to the lower decks. And the floor below the one they were on, D deck, should be completely submerged. That meant... Hey, wait a minute. This elevator came up from somewhere under us, right? Oh, yeah, I guess it did. It didn't open right away after you pressed the button. There was a motor noise like it was moving, and then it opened. Yeah, exactly. Let's take a look inside. Junpei jerked his head towards the interior of the elevator. It's not wet at all, is it? The walls and even the floor are totally dry. Oh, you're right, they are. She looked around the elevator, slightly embarrassed. Well, let's test it. Test it? Yeah, watch this. Junpei put one foot in the elevator and bent around the corner of the door until he could see the floor buttons. There were only two, E and C. He pushed the E button and jumped out of the elevator. The door slid shut, and they heard the grinding of the motor as the elevator car moved down. So if it comes back full of water, that means E deck is submerged. If not, it may be safe to assume it's okay. A few moments later, they heard the sound of the elevator door grinding open several floors down. Junpei nodded to June and pressed the elevator button again. A few moments later, the elevator returned. The door slid open, and just as Junpei had expected, there was no water to be found. See? Junpei couldn't resist puffing out his chest, just a little bit. For some reason, I just pictured a little Robin, just puffing out his little orange chest. Said, "That's right, that's what I'm talking about, now get in the elevator." June, however, still looked confused. What does that mean? How could the E deck be safe if the D deck is full of water? Well, here's what I think. The elevator shaft and E deck must be watertight and separated from whatever the ship's been punctured. Here, let me show you. He pulled out his notebook and pen and sketched out a rough illustration. Ah, I see. So, is that why the ship hasn't sunk? The shape of the inside keeps it from all filling with water. Yeah, I think that's what's going on. Junpei continued talking as he closed the notebook and slipped it back into his pocket. So I'm gonna go down and check it out. You stay here, alright? No, that's a bad idea. Bad idea. No. Oh, come on, just do it, alright? He gave June's shoulder a reassuring squeeze and hopped into the elevator. No, I don't agree with this. He pushed the E button and the door began to close. June looked worried, her eyes darting back and forth as if she was trying to make a decision, when suddenly... I'm coming with you! Huh? The last possible moment, June dashed forward, turning sideways just in time to slip through the gap between the closing doors. Junpei jammed his finger against the open button, but it was too late. The door had shut. He and June were in the elevator, and it was headed down to the E deck. Good. Why would we want to thin our numbers even more? Snake was alone, and look what happened to him. He was so surprised by June that he didn't even have time to think about what awaited him on the E deck. The elevator stopped, and the door slid open. They stepped off onto the floor outside the elevator. Nothing seemed especially unusual. No fish going about their fishy business, or jellyfish floating lazily through the water. There was, however, a blowfish. Or at least something that looked very much like one. June's cheeks were puffed out, and her mouth a tiny, intense frown. Oh, knock it off. It's just like I thought. This part hasn't flooded. Come on, just look around. There's no water here. June looks around nervously then. Exhaled. You're right. It's not flooded at all. See? There's a whole lot of water. Yeah, right on top of us. What's gonna happen if the ceiling breaks? Junpei thought about that for a moment. We'd probably die. Oh. Well, don't be so casual about something like that. Well, at any rate, we should probably go back as soon as we can, once we're done looking around down here. Lotus and Santa might already be back. Okay. Good idea. Junpei glanced around the room they'd found themselves in. The first thing he noticed was a set of thick iron bars. Man, I'm getting tired of these bars and these restraints! Let me go! They ran the length of the room, separating the left elevator from the right one. Well, we can't go over there. Right. And perhaps... in the corner of the room that housed the elevators, Junpei found an opening. He walked up to and stuck his head around the corner. A long, straight hallway stretched out in front of him. That door at the end of the hallway, there's something written on it. I wonder what it could be. I can't see from here. Yeah, let's go have a look. Junpei and June set off down the hallway at a brisk clip. A brisk clip. What? Somewhere between a run and a jog. A run and a jog. I'm trying to picture that now. Kind of like an old man trying to run or something, I guess. Before long, they found themselves in front of the door. On it was a number written in bright red paint. 6. Wait, June is 6? Wait, we can't open it anyway. There's only 2 of us. I knew it. This is a numbered door. And indeed, there was a red bolted to the wall, right next to the door. Of course, with only 2 people, there wasn't much they could do with it. Alright, let's head back. Yeah. Junpei and June turned and headed back to C deck. On their way back, Junpei noticed a map on the wall. As it turned out, it was a burnt map of the ship's interior for E deck. Huh. So you guys found door 1. They'd met back up with Santa and Lotus, who had explained what they'd found. Apparently, there was another numbered door on A deck, just like the one on E deck, beyond the door that the Earth Key opened. According to Santa and Lotus, there was a 1 on the door. All told, they had discovered 2 doors, the 6 and the 1 door. It is interesting that E deck wasn't flooded. Lotus was quiet for a moment, lost in thought. Well, we don't really know if all of E deck is safe. We only checked the area around the elevator. Even so, it's still very interesting. You said the 6th door was there, right? Yeah. Then that means Zero planned all this out, even the sinking. That would have meant some pretty serious remodeling of the ship's interior. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. Yeah. I wonder how long it took. I can't even imagine how much it must have cost. Would have been a ton, that's for sure. That does go along with what Ace was saying. The most reasonable explanation would be that this was done by some organization, with access to a whole lot of cash. Yeah, it does make sense. But it's so simple, isn't it? That kind of explanation is so simple. And it's just such a complex and unsimple thing that for it to be such a... you know, the perps being such a simple thing, just doesn't quite add up. The thought made them all go quiet for a moment. June bit her lip while Lotus sighed softly to herself, and Santa cracked a stiff neck and stared off into the distance at nothing. I don't think it's a very good idea to stay here. June looked up at Junpei with large, pleading eyes. Yeah, you're right. Ace and his team might be back already. Well, June, Junpei, and I should be able to open door 1. Huh? You guys leaving me behind? 19. Makes sense. Just kidding. Alright, let's go. Lotus's words were all about what impetus they needed. Back to the large hospital room they went. I don't like the idea of any one of us being alone anymore. I don't think it... no. The moment they stepped inside, a tremendous voice echoed across the room. Hey! Where the hell did you guys go? It was 7. Ace was right behind him and Clover was behind Ace, although she seemed to be hanging back. It looked as though there was something strange about them. 7 had the look of a man who'd seen a ghost. Ace was just as pale, and Clover looked as though she was only moments from passing out entirely. For a long moment, they simply stood there, looking at one another. Junpei looked around nervously, waiting for someone else to speak. No one did. He looked at 7. What happened? The hell kind of question is that? 7 was trying very hard to be angry, but something had shaken him hard. His shoulders were trembling and his voice was strained. Snake is... No. 7 couldn't finish. He just looked away, his face twisted by... Junpei wasn't sure what. Instead, Ace spoke. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and spoke. Snake is dead. He died, just as the 9th man did. Oh no. It was as if all the air had suddenly been sucked out the room. Junpei felt his heartbeat quicken, and he'd realized he was having trouble breathing. He could feel cold sweat beating on his forehead and neck. June, Santa, and Lotus looked the way he felt. All 3 were frozen in place, their faces white. Oh my god. That's not true, is it? We should make sure. Yeah, right. We should. They nodded to one another and headed to the number 3 door. Wait! Not that way! They stopped short and turned to look at 7. He was pointing at the door with no number. I stuck a screwdriver in there to keep the door from closing all the way. It's not locked, so you can go in that way. Where is he? The shower room, on the left side of the hallway. I put a broom in there too, to keep the door open. We can get in without going through the numbered door, right? Wait, doesn't that mean we can all go in there? Yeah, that's right. Their new destination clear, Junpei and his companions headed for the door with no number. What the fuck? Once in the hallway, it was easy to spot the metal door on the left. It hadn't been open when they'd been through before. But now, just as 7 had said, there was a broom stuck between the door and the frame, keeping it open. They looked as if for a moment... They looked at it for a moment, and stepped inside. God, it smells horrible. Lotus wrinkled her nose and covered her mouth in disgust. Even Santa pinched his nose shut. Yeah, this is pretty awful. I feel like I'm gonna puke. It was just as bad as they said, perhaps worse. A hideous smell filled the air, so thick they could almost taste it. It was sour and smelled of fish, feces, and burnt meat. It worked its way through Junpei's nose and down his throat to pound against the entrance of his stomach. He put his hands over his mouth and struggled to keep what little was in his stomach where it belonged. Oh god, why is there the letters L and R on the wall? They didn't have to wonder where the body was. There was blood everywhere, a few arms of the splatter reaching toward them as they walked through the door. All one had to do was follow the many radial arms to their source. The body itself was hidden behind a divider. Oh no. June, you should stay here. But please just do me a favor, okay? Alright? He didn't give her a chance to say no. He put his hand on her shoulder as if to shove her into the ground like a tent pole, turned and walked toward the end of the divider. It felt like it took an eternity for him to get there. Santa and Lotus followed, timid and nervous as a pair of children. Eventually, they reached the divider. No. They looked at one another and nodded, slowly. Junpei put his hands on the divider and peered out around the corner. No!
For a moment he forgot to breathe.
He felt his heart collapse in his chest like an empty cigarette carton, and time froze. He knew in that instant that he would take the image before him to the grave. Ah!
What was left of the body sat in a sea of blood. Chunks of flesh torn from the body sat in the blood like tiny islands in a great red sea. A vast ragged hole had been torn in the torso, and what remained of his intestines spilled out like it was fresh spaghetti. Smaller chunks of meat had splattered against the wall and became stuck where as they dried. Globules of yellowish fat had left trails like tiny slugs as gravity pulled them down the wall, even as they dried to it. Just like Ace said. Santa's voice was strained. Junpei suspected he was holding down some vomit of his own. Just like the Ninth Man. The detonator in his bracelet set off the bomb in his gut. It looked as though the explosion had been quite powerful. His legs were both bent in an odd, unnatural way, and his left arm had split open, exposing the painfully white bone of his ulna. Oh God. His bracelet lay next to him. Wait. It seemed to have hit the wall hard enough to have shattered the display, which lay on the ground in pieces. Half of his head had simply collapsed. The blood coating almost made it look like the raw pizza dough covered in tomato sauce. His clothes, too, were covered in blood. The burgundy tie, the white shirt, the jacket with the yellow piping, and the grey slacks. They were all familiar to Junpei. No mistake about that. It's Snake. Lotus's voice was unnaturally deep and strained, and Junpei heard it catch in her throat. I'm not buying it. The squeal of tortured metal made Junpei's teeth curl. It sounded like the noise of a ghost would make. No matter how many times he heard it, he never got used to it. Every time it put him on edge. It didn't help that there was a girl nearby who looked far more like a ghost than a living human should. It was Clover. She sat on the edge of the bed, her head drooping, listlessly onto her chest. Her eyes were blank and stared across the room at nothing. Her breathing was slow and mechanical. Aside from the rise and fall of her chest, she didn't move. Junpei felt as if even a nudge might cause her to shatter into 1,000 pieces. I see. Snake was probably murdered. Chances are he was killed the same way the Ninth Man was. Seven lowered his voice, likely in an effort to keep Clover from hearing what he had to say. There were 4 other people in the room with Junpei and Seven. Ace, Santa, June, and Lotus. Seven looked at each one of them in turn, and continued. It's pretty straightforward. Not that hard to figure out why they did it. How they did it, sorry. First, the killers got Snake to authenticate on the red to open the door 3. Then they shoved him into it, alone. And waited 9 seconds for the door to shut. Once that door shut, it was over for Snake, but he didn't give up. He probably knew it wouldn't do him any good, but he probably ran into the shower, looking for the dead. It was a small chance, but it wasn't like he had anything to lose. Unfortunately, it didn't work. The detonator's only deactivated if everybody who authenticated when they went in uses the dead. Then 81 seconds after he was shoved in, that happened. I see. I don't know, I just don't buy it. I don't buy it. This could very well be Snake, but think about it. We don't know why he got snatched.